The famous Sonic the Hedgehog game from 2006 almost sank the entire franchise. But what went wrong? Why was it so bad? For this video, I've rounded up a good selection of sources from my Google search in an attempt to answer that question. I've also played as much of the game as I could stand to see how it holds up in 2022. A perfect storm of a terrible 3D platform game and someone who is woefully inadequate against gravity. We all know I'm not going to be recommending this game, but feel free to enjoy this 10-minute montage of my failed attempt at completing it, as I take you on a journey of failure from all parties. With the newest generation of consoles, namely the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, launching in the mid-2000s, this spurred Sega to assign Sonic Team to begin work on a new game in the best-selling Sonic series. Furthermore, the franchise was approaching its 15th anniversary, so the intention was to take the new game back to Sonic's roots, and to take into consideration what it was that made Sonic so popular. Yuji Naka also wanted to mimic the success comic book movies were having at the time, such as Spider-Man 2. He is quoted saying, "When Marvel or DC Comics turn their characters into films, they are thinking of them as blockbusters, huge hits, and that's what we're trying to emulate with Sonic 2006. These movies reach a massive audience, way further than the original fans of the comic." With this vision in mind, development of the game began in late 2004. Sonic Team used the same title as the original 1991 Sonic the Hedgehog, which Naka announced at E3 in 2005. The use of this title was to indicate that it would be a major advance from previous games and a reboot that returned to the series' roots. Shortly after, though, things started to go wrong. In March 2006, Yuji Naka, who was the last remaining member of the original Sonic dev team still with Sega at the time, resigned from his position as head of Sonic Team to found his own studio, Probe. At the time, this was considered a bad sign for the future of the game, and oh boy was that assumption correct. The original team that had made Sonic so great, Naka, designer and director Naoto Oshima, and producer Mark Kearney, were now all gone. At this point, Yujiro Ogawa stepped in as the game's director. To further complicate the development, the game was originally planned for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 and the Wii, or Nintendo Revolution at the time, with the expectation that the new Nintendo console would feature similar specs to Microsoft and Sony's next-gen consoles. This assumption proved to be very, very wrong, and the Wii's capabilities were far from expectations. So the already stretched development team was split into two, one half focusing on trying to complete Sonic the Hedgehog, with the other half working on Sonic and the Secret Rings for the Wii. This also caused yet another change in leadership. With Ogawa now focusing on Secret Rings, Sonic the Hedgehog was now onto its third director, Shun Nakamura, with only a few months on hand before the game's scheduled release, and half the resource. With this happening in the background, hype for the game started to grow. The trailer featured Sonic running at high speed in detailed 3D environments, and the soundtrack was on point. This hype only added more pressure to the already stretched thin development team. Despite the fragmentation of these teams during development, series producer and Sonic Team head Takashi Iizuka asserts that the real problem with Sonic 06 was the deadlines. He said, "We missed out on that really important time to polish and tune and manipulate the map and make sure that the world felt really good and the gameplay felt good. Because it didn't have that, it didn't turn out as good as the development team wanted." Sega had desperately wanted the game to release in time for the holiday season, so it seems pretty clear this was a relatively early example of a game falling foul of crunch culture. The game was released for Xbox 360 in November 2006, with the PS3 version dropping 1 month later. As I'm sure you're aware, the reception from critics and players alike was dire. So, full disclosure, I did not finish this game, but not for lack of trying. I made it as far as Kingdom Valley before I lost the will to live and the loading screen was burned into my eyeballs. But up until that point I have many hours of gameplay to reflect on. I've seen some reviews, rightfully so, absolutely slating this game. I've also seen some that say it's not that bad. So where does it fall for me? The opening cutscene of this game is actually quite impressive, which made me wonder if this is where all the budget went. This harshly cuts to an in-game cutscene and I find myself in the central hub of the game, a completely empty and soulless town called Soliana. I know this game is old, but this is the same year that Oblivion, Gears of War and many other great games were released, so there's no excuse for this. I could go and talk to the citizens of this ghost town, who would silently gesticulate wildly as if they had plenty to say to me, but could only manage one word out loud. A special nod also goes to the guy in the Trials of Soliana whose "hey" still haunts my dreams. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I go to see a man about some shoes and run through some hoops before I can finally leave to play the game properly in Wave Ocean. Now, I didn't hate this section too much, as there was definitely an element of just getting used to the controls, and I was provided with some pure gold when recording this gameplay. But after dying a few times, I thought I would be sent back to the beginning of the level. But oh no, I was wrong. I wasn't even sent back to Soliana. Oh no. I was sent back to the opening cutscene, to sit through not only that, but all the loading screens. This certainly upped the stakes and gave me incentive not to be so shit. Once I got the hang of the game, the controls weren't too bad. My main issue was with the camera angle, especially when Sonic literally runs past the camera and I can't see anything for a split second. When things were going well though, it was actually kind of fun, if not a little janky looking, especially when you're jumping off surfaces and end up upside down for some reason. These parts also felt like a waste of time as well, because I couldn't really do anything other than press a button and they were quite jarring to watch. After successfully trapping a killer whale, for reasons, I thought I had completed the level, but it just kept on going, this time at a significantly faster speed which was impossible to control. There wasn't much for me to do here except trying in vain to avoid obstacles and launch myself off objects with button prompts. I made it past this level through what felt like sheer luck, but nonetheless I was pretty pleased with myself. Despite its flaws, the game did feel manageable, at this point. I also got to play as Tails during this first act. When I first cut to them, it would seem that they'd rather drown than having to endure this game.
Okay, Sonic, I'll be right back. Ah!
I know I'm bad, but Tails was facing the wrong way to begin with, and I wondered if the game was just trolling me. Once I was back in Soliana, Tails would follow me around, but would constantly be bumping into things, of which I received a running commentary of. I'm fairly certain they threw themselves into the water at some point as well. I then made it to the most bizarre boss fight I've ever experienced, when Sonic faced off against Silver. Not only does he keep spamming the same couple of lines at me, but I literally could not see him, and had to base my homing attacks off his dialogue and hope for the best. I resorted to just running around in circles and using the homing attack when I knew he was about to throw things at me via telekinesis. I had an odd sense of pride from beating him, but that was probably my peak of this game. On to Crisis City next, and I will say this level was actually okay, and I do think there is perhaps a half-decent game buried underneath this hot mess I've been presented with here. I'm not sure I'm on board with the narrative though, which includes a blossoming love story between the human Elise and Sonic the Hedgehog. Just when I thought this scene brought to you by the Windows desktop background couldn't get any weirder, Elise breaks the fourth wall in an apparent cry for help to break free from the internal torment of being in this game. Curious as to what Sega was thinking with this storyline, I tried to find some kind of statement from them, explaining their logic, but I found no such thing, leading me to believe there was no logic and someone just managed to sneak their weird fetish into the game. I didn't realise when I started this game that there are also stories you can play for the other side characters as well. So once you've finished the Sonic playthrough, you can go back and play as Tails, for example. This will fill in some of the story gaps you might have noticed. But was I going to do this? Like hell I was. The furthest I made it into this game was playing as Silver in the Kingdom Valley Act, and that is where I finally threw in the towel. It wasn't just the gameplay that I gave up on though, it was the loading screens. Constantly stopping and starting was just infuriating, and I couldn't face being set back and having to repeat the trials of Soliana again, and have to look at this guy's face one more time. At this point, I could have started playing one of the other characters' stories as a little bit of a break, but I never wanted to see this game again, and still had to write this script and trawl through hours of recorded footage to bring you this. Playing this game was one of the most bizarre and frustrating experiences of my life. I would sooner spend an entire week building IKEA flat-pack furniture than spend another minute on this game. The music was good though, particularly during the Crisis City level. But other than that, there were few redeeming features that I could see. As far as a verdict goes, I feel like the angry video game nerd sums up the experience of playing this rather eloquently. As he rages, I quote, "Everyone calls it Sonic 06, but I call it Sonic 0 fucking piece of shit." A fucking piece of shit that Sega sealed with a kiss. Apparently I'm not the only one who has considered that there could be a decent game here, despite the odd narrative choices. Project 06 is a very ambitious fan-made project to remake the entire game in Unity. The aim was to focus on remaking the decent parts of the game. It has been developed by an Argentinian programmer, Ian Chaos X Morris, for Windows. There haven't been any updates on this project for about a year now, but significant progress has been made. During the first demo, released in April 2019, there were 2 fully playable levels, Wave Ocean and Kingdom Valley. Each level was perfectly recreated with 3 playable characters and was said to play excellently and was a whole lot of fun. Just goes to show that if the proper amount of time and love is put into a project, almost anything can be achieved. The second demo, which added 3 levels, Dusty Desert, Flame Core and Radical Train, was released in October 2019, and a bug fix update was released that November. Following the November update, Morris took a break to focus on other projects, but a third demo was released in July 2020, which added the rest of the stages in Sonic's story, followed by an update in August 2020 that addressed numerous bugs in the previous build. A fourth demo was released in September 2021 that added Shadow and all of his campaign levels, followed by a bug fix update later that month. Since then, there have been no further updates, but I can't see anything from the developer saying that he's no longer working on it, so perhaps someday there will be another demo release. In the meantime, if you do want to check it out, I've put their YouTube channel in the comments, with each video description containing a link to the demos. There's hope yet for Sonic 06, even though it may be too late for many. Well, I hope you enjoyed that tale of lost opportunities, overworked developers, and the resulting mess. If you've made it this far, please do consider liking the video and maybe even subscribing. I hope to see you in the next one.